choice. The widow could have held on to the last handful of flour and the last portion of oil and used them for herself and her son. By any purely rational calculation, that was the more logical choice. But she gave first. She gave before she knew the outcome. And the miracle did not follow the giving as a reward follows obedience. The miracle was already in motion before Elijah arrived. The generosity of God toward her household had already been set in motion. Elijah's arrival was not the beginning of the provision. It was the moment the provision arrived at the door. I want you to consider, what is already in motion toward you that has not yet arrived at your door? What provision has already been sent that is still on its way? What connections, what doors, what moments of clarity and opportunity and unexpected goodness are already moving through the world toward the address where you live? I ask this not to generate false excitement, but to invite you into a posture of genuinely open expectation. Not the anxious waiting of someone who is not sure whether anything is coming, but the patient, grounded waiting of someone who knows the nature of the Father who sends and trusts the character of the one who has promised to provide. There is a way of receiving my generosity that I want to draw your attention to, because I think it matters deeply, not for my sake, but for yours. Think about how a child who is completely secure in being loved receives a gift. There is no calculation in the moment of receiving, no quiet assessment of whether this particular gift was earned on this particular day, no anxious wondering about whether another gift will come, or whether this one has strings attached, or whether accepting it creates an obligation that will become complicated later. A secure child simply receives, eyes wide, arms open, joy uncomplicated by strategy, and says thank you, not because thank you is the admission fee, but because gratitude is simply what happens in a heart that recognizes it has been loved. That is the posture I am inviting you into, not the posture of someone negotiating with a distant provider, not the posture of someone calculating their standing before they dare to expect anything. The posture of a child who knows they are loved, who knows the Father is good, who receives with open hands what comes from open hands. Here is what I want you to see. The expressions of my generosity towards you in a single ordinary day are almost beyond counting, and most of them pass unnoticed because familiarity has made them invisible. The air that fills your lungs right now was engineered with a precision that took the interplay of innumerable variables that had to be exactly as they are for you to be able to breathe, and it was prepared for breathing before there was any human lung that needed to breathe it. The light that falls on whatever surface your eyes are resting on right now was calibrated in the physics of the universe before the first sunrise. The capacity you have for language, the fact that you are understanding these words, that you have a mind capable of encountering meaning and being moved by it, is a gift of such staggering extravagance that no adequate comparison exists. The capacity for emotion, for memory, for imagination, for beauty, for connection, for love, for longing, for hope, for the particular ache that comes when something beautiful surprises you, these are not incidental features of a biological system. They are the fingerprints of a creator who could not make anything without putting something of himself into it. You are made in my image. That means every capacity you have for depth in relationship and creativity and love is a reflection, however partial, of something in me. You carry my image the way a child carries the features of their parent. And that image, that capacity, that depth of interior life, is the most lavish gift anyone has ever been given. When did you last let that settle over you like something real? When did you last feel genuinely astonished by the fact of your own existence? Not in a grandiose way, but in the quiet way of someone who has suddenly noticed something that was always there. You exist. You are here. The universe was arranged in such a way, through chains of cause and effect and choice and circumstance and grace that span millennia, that you specifically, with your exact combination of experience and gifts and wounds and longings and particular way of seeing things, came to be alive in this moment. That is not incidental. That is intention. You are not an accident in my creation. You are my deliberate, particular, irreplaceable intention. And from that starting place, every other expression of grace flows in natural sequence. I gave you existence. Then I gave you the relationship, the possibility of knowing me, of being known by me, of the conversation we are in right now. Then when that relationship was broken by the accumulated weight of human turning away, I gave the most costly thing, the restoration of that relationship through the life and death of my Son, who took onto himself everything that stood between you and the fullness of belonging to me. Then I gave the Spirit, who lives in you now as the most intimate and continuously present form of companionship that any being in the universe has ever been offered. The full God, living in and with and through you, not visiting, dwelling. Against that backdrop, do you genuinely believe that the provision for your practical needs, the wisdom for your decisions, the healing of your relationships, the opening of the doors that need to open, the restoration of what has been damaged, the fulfillment of the purpose you were made for, do you genuinely believe any of that is beyond the willingness or the capacity of the one who has already given everything he has? If I gave you my own life, do you think I will withhold the things your body needs? If I gave you my own spirit, do you think I will leave you without wisdom when wisdom is what the moment requires? Peace is one of the forms of my giving that often goes unrecognized as a gift, and I want to speak about it directly, because it is more available to you than you may currently know. The peace that passes understanding is not something you manufacture through discipline or technique or sufficient positivity. It is not something you arrive at by successfully controlling your circumstances or your thoughts. It is something that is given. It comes in past the anxiety, the way warmth comes into a cold room when a fire is lit. The room does not generate the warmth. The room simply receives it when the source is present. I am the source. I am the God of peace, which means peace is not just something I occasionally offer when the situation seems to warrant it. Peace is woven into my nature the same way abundance is. When you draw close to me, you draw close to peace. Not because you have achieved the right spiritual state, but because proximity to me means proximity to what I am. And what I am includes peace that does not depend on circumstances resolving in your favor. It is deeper than circumstances. It runs below them the way underground water runs below a landscape that may be dry on the surface. The surface conditions do not determine the presence of what runs beneath. What does it look like to receive that peace as a gift freely given? It looks like choosing, in the moments when anxiety rises, to turn toward me rather than into the anxiety. Not suppressing the anxiety. Not pretending the concern is not real. Not performing a cheerful denial of what is difficult. But in the middle of the difficulty, turning your face toward the Father, coming to the table, sitting down in the presence that is offered to you, not as a reward for getting your anxiety under control, but simply as the inheritance of a child who belongs to this household. Wisdom, too, is a form of grace that I give freely, and I mean freely in the fullest sense of that word, without condition, without prerequisite of spiritual maturity or absence of doubt or demonstrated track record of correct decisions. The invitation is simply stated: if anyone lacks wisdom, ask. Ask the one who gives abundantly to all and does not make anyone feel foolish for needing it. And the wisdom comes, not always in the form of a clear and immediate answer, sometimes as a gradual dawning of understanding, sometimes as a nudge that only makes sense in retrospect, sometimes as the word of a person whose path crosses yours at the right moment. But it comes, because giving wisdom to those who need it is one of the ways my nature expresses itself most naturally. What decision are you facing right now that requires more clarity than you currently have? What question has been sitting unanswered in you for longer than feels comfortable? What direction have you been uncertain about, searching for a clarity that has not yet come? The door to asking is open. It has always been open. And the Father who waits on the other side of that door gives not with the reluctance of someone being asked for something they would rather keep, but with the eager delight of a father who has been waiting for his child to ask and is glad to give. I want to talk with you about something that may seem small, but is, in truth, one of the most significant expressions of my lavish care that you encounter. The ordinary goodness of your everyday life. There's a habit of mind that many of my children have developed, completely understandably, where the good things become invisible through repetition, and the difficult things remain vivid because they require a response. The pain demands attention. The problem calls for a solution. The difficulty has to be addressed. And in the midst of all that necessary attention to what is hard, the vast, quiet ocean of ordinary goodness that surrounds every day becomes transparent, essentially invisible, a background that is taken for granted because it has always been there. But think about what is actually in that background. The fact that a meal tastes good, and your body knows how to receive nourishment from it. The way that laughter comes unexpectedly and, even for a brief moment, the weight of everything serious lifts slightly. The memory of someone you love that comes to mind unbidden and warms something in your chest. The moment when a piece of music, or a shaft of afternoon light, or the smell of something familiar touches a deep place in you, and for just a second you feel the presence of beauty in the world. The conversation that goes better than expected. The unexpected kindness of a person who did not have to be kind. The moment of understanding between two people who have been struggling to understand each other. The child's laughter. The friend's steady presence. The night that ends and the day that begins again. Every one of those things is an expression of my generosity. Not in a vague, general sense, but actually and precisely. I am the source of every good and perfect gift. Every good thing that touches your life in any form, however small, however apparently ordinary, is flowing from me. Not from luck. Not from a universe that is randomly kind sometimes and randomly cruel other times. From me. From a nature that cannot interact with the world without goodness flowing out, the way the sun cannot interact with the world without light flowing out. What would it change in you to move through your days with that awareness? To receive each small good thing not as a lucky accident, but as the specific attention of a Father who arranged for that particular good to reach you in that particular moment. To say thank you not occasionally when something extraordinary happens, but continuously, as the ongoing appropriate response to an ongoing outpouring that never actually stops. Gratitude, practiced that way, is not primarily a spiritual discipline or a technique for mental health. It is the simple, accurate response to what is actually happening. It is your heart agreeing with reality. The widow kept the jar and the jug filled for weeks and months, through the quiet, ordinary meals that kept her household alive. There was no dramatic refilling moment that she witnessed. She simply reached in and there was enough, again and again. The miracle was not in a single spectacular event. The miracle was in the faithfulness of ordinary daily provision, day after day, in the unremarkable rhythm of enough. That is what most of my generosity looks like in human lives. Not the dramatic exception, but the faithful ordinary. The daily bread, the daily enough, the daily thread of goodness woven through the texture of your days, so continuous that familiarity has rendered it nearly invisible. Look for it. Not because looking for it generates the blessing, but because seeing what is already there is one of the ways you come into fuller possession of what has always been yours. A child who does not notice the gifts their parent gives does not lose the love behind the gifts, but they miss something of the relationship that those gifts were meant to build. The father who gives wants to be seen giving, not for the sake of gratitude as payment, but because the seeing of what has been given deepens the relationship, and deepened relationship is the whole point. The gift is the invitation to greater closeness with the giver. Before I speak to you about what lies ahead, I want to linger a little longer in the question of what generosity actually means for the shape of a life lived in awareness of it. Because there is a version of receiving grace that is passive. Sit back, wait, let good things come. And that version misses something essential. My generosity is not designed to produce passive recipients. It is designed to produce giving people. When you truly understand that what you have comes from an inexhaustible source, something in you begins to relax its grip on what it holds. When you truly believe that the jar does not run out, you stop hoarding the oil. When you truly know that your Father's resources have no ceiling, you stop treating your own resources as if any act of giving might be the act that tips you into poverty. The widow gave, And the giving was not simply the condition for the miracle. The giving was the character formation that the miracle produced in her. Having received so lavishly, having watched the jar fill day after day by no effort of her own, she would have been changed by that experience in ways that went far beyond the practical relief of having enough to eat. She would have known, in the deep experiential way that transforms rather than just informs, that abundance is the environment she lived in. That the universe she inhabited was not a scarcity engine to be navigated with careful rationing, but a flowing abundance to be participated in with open hands. And that knowledge changes a person. It changes the way they hold what they have. It changes the way they respond to others' needs. It changes the way they walk through the world. The same thing is available to you. Not the theoretical knowledge that God is good, but the experiential, life-shaping knowing that comes from receiving His grace over and over in the actual texture of your actual days, and then allowing that receiving to produce a corresponding openness in you. You become what you receive, when you receive it fully and consciously. A person who receives love becomes loving. A person who receives